The following presentation is a production of Ride the Wave Media.
It's the Best Birth Podcast, where we interview experts that elevate you as you prepare your heart and mind to have the best birth.
Each episode will interview professionals so you are prepared for pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Our experts will build your confidence and empower you to trust your intuition throughout your pregnancy.
This audio is taken from videos on YouTube. Watch the entire episodes on YouTube at Birth Made Mindful. You're listening to the Best Birth Podcast. Our guest today is Katie Förster, a doula, and we're so excited to talk to her today.
Katie has been a birth doula for 7 years and has always been fascinated by the psychosomatic aspects of birth. The births of each of her 4 children were transformative in their own way, and she loves to support women as they prepare for the life-changing threshold of becoming a mother or a mother again. Welcome, Katie.
Hi, I'm excited to be here.
Can you tell us why you wanted to become a doula? Tell us a little bit about your journey getting there.
Of course. So my first birth, I went into it with this big ego. I was like, I have this high pain tolerance. My mom's such a baby and she had 7. Like, I'm not going to have a problem. This will be fine. So I didn't put a lot of time or energy into preparing because I was just like, Matt, I've got this. I've always got it. I'm fine. It ended up being a very long and very difficult experience. I didn't know how to engage. I really wanted to go unmedicated, but didn't know how really to engage with contractions. My husband jokes and says that I was trying to win. Like every contraction came and I was like, oh, I'm better than you. But that doesn't work. That doesn't work for birth. I didn't know it at the time, but that birth went very long. I ended up choosing an epidural and had a lot of not complications, but just things I didn't want around delivery, and walked away just feeling really defeated. Like, why did I fail so bad at that? I thought I'd be good at that. Why did I fail? So when I became pregnant again, it was like, hey, I want to do something really differently this time. And I kind of explored all options. It's like, do I just want a C-section? Do I just want to opt out? Like, I don't want to do that again. That sucked. But then I decided to take a hypnobirthing class, and that class really opened my eyes to a lot of things. I realized how much I had been at odds with my body. Like, I had not known how to let my body do what it needed to do. I had tried to be in control of birth the entire time. And that revelation was like, okay, that's not good. And that probably applies to other parts of my life, right? But I prepared for that birth very differently, very intentionally, tried to engage with my body, did a lot of relaxation tracks and just practice being more present. And that birth was beautiful. It was a completely different story. I went unmedicated, was super happy with the experience. It was fast. She came in just over 2 hours. And after that, I walked away with just this wind, beneath my wings, right? It was just a whole different experience becoming a mother after having such a positive birth. And my husband joked that whenever I talked to anybody with a uterus, that birth would somehow come into the conversation. He's like, you've got to do something with that. That's so much passion. You need to do something there. It's obviously something you love. So we had those 2 babies in Germany. That's where I was living at the time. And then we moved over here, and a friend was like, you should become a doula. And I was like, what's that? So I looked it up, and I was like, oh, that's a job. That's a real job. So I looked up the next training, took it, and never looked back.
That is so fantastic. I just love hearing about how you approached birth in a different way and how it made such a difference. That concept of battling against your body. Even the term birth warrior can sometimes cause people to feel like they have to fight. And bringing that sort of energy into your birth where it's like, oh, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to fight this can be really detrimental, instead of just feeling like I'm going to surrender to this, or I am going to own this. I'm going to commune with these contractions in a way that allows our body to open and expand and prepare for the delivery of our baby.
Yeah, totally. I would agree with that.
Can you tell us a little bit more about somatics and that approach? What does that mean to you?
So somatics is a relatively new field, but I think anciently we've always had access to this, but it's just kind of coming back into our radar. And basically it's the idea that our body is intelligent, that our body is both the place that we put our trauma and our struggles, that it can store those things, and that is also the way to move through them. So somatics is usually connected to the nervous system, so understanding what our flight, fight, and freeze, fawn responses all are, and how we can use those responses to like build out our ability to be in our bodies and to move through any sort of difficult experiences we have without it being like lasting traumatic. Because we're built to be able to handle difficult experiences. It's in us. But we're in a society where we're kind of taught to pretend like things aren't hard. And we're taught to kind of shove down our difficult emotions, pretend like we're not grieving, pretend like we're not angry, like kind of get over it and move on very quickly. And somatics is kind of that field that's just learning that if we can tap into that intelligence of our body that is real and there and very powerful, that we can move through a lot of our history and just move into the future in a way that's very present and able to handle things that happen without it becoming overwhelming, like sending us into a state of like flooded or out of controlness or shut down, which is where a lot of us live. That's kind of my pattern that I've recognized, is that I tend to move into shutdown. That's kind of the I've got it all covered, high pain tolerance, right? It's like I just don't feel it. I just don't feel it. But the body pays a price when we just don't feel it, because somebody has to feel it because it's real. And so somatics and birth haven't really been connected in a big way, and that's my big passion right now. I'm teaching like a birth class for doulas about how to connect kind of that nervous system somatics with the birth space, and understanding trauma and its effects in more of like a body-based perspective rather than like a psychology mind-based perspective.
What are a few tools that you teach for our women so that they can connect their mind and their body during birth?
One of the big ones is during pregnancy to just kind of get very conscious. I call it tracking, and that's what it's called in most of somatics, is learning to track what your body's doing, to track your current feelings, and to begin to engage with intense sensation in a safe way. So one of the ways like a lot of birth classes teach is that you hold a piece of ice in your hand. You hold it in your hand and you try and see, can I engage with this sensation? Is it overwhelming to me? What does my mind do while I'm holding this piece of ice? Because your mind might start like, let it go. I want to let it go. And there may be actual panic that kind of comes up when you're holding a piece of ice, even though there's no danger. It'll just melt into your hand. There is no present danger. But if your body has a large reaction to that sensation intensity, then you can notice, okay, I have some work here to be done to be able to sit with intensity. And I think that the point of it's just to be conscious and just to understand this is where I'm at. Like it's a long journey to be able to connect with your body. We live in a society where women especially are taught not to trust our bodies. So learning that through that is really helpful. Mindfulness exercises that are body-based. So not being mindful and like staying in your brain, but being mindful and sinking into your body. Like, what do I smell right now? What can I feel? How do my clothes feel on my body? Can I feel the back of my body? Like, that's a big one, is can I sense my back? Because a lot of us are so brain and forward oriented that we're not used to being in our back body. So a lot of just very, very inward and like body-based preparations like that can be very powerful.
One of the first times that I really was in tune with the back of my body, I was scuba diving. And because I was wearing the tank on my back, it felt as if there was weight or this pressure. But then also when you're underwater, you're not in a world like ours because there's everything that's above you, below you, around you, even though our eyes are only focused forward. And it's magical to go scuba diving. Many people are, really afraid of the creatures or being underwater, but then just realizing that I could settle in and allow my breath, to regulate and to control, and then you just get to experience the magic that's there.
That sounds super peaceful. I think that part of the fear is that it's just a very different sensation, and we're not used to being with our sensations, like you said. But when we can sit into it and be like, this is different. Can I experiencing it without attaching fear to it because it is unknown? And can I let it be new and just get curious? And curiosity is a huge part of any birth preparation. Can be really powerful. Can I just be curious about what's happening? Can I be curious about how it feels to have my stomach grow? Can I be curious about these new feelings of guilt that I'm feeling? Where is this coming from? Can I be curious about the way my relationship is shifting, rather than feeling like it's all an attack? Can I just get curious about what's happening and engage with it in kind of that way where it's like I'm tiptoeing towards rather than trying to resist and shut out. So
You spoke of dealing with the intense emotions, learning how to feel these in our bodies. What else do you recommend as we're preparing for labor?
I think that's just it. Like, it sounds so simple, but it's learning to be okay with things when they come up and creating space for them. So noticing today I am very on edge. Where do I feel that in my body? That's a question I ask myself as I'm trying to learn to engage better with my body all the time. Where am I feeling this in my body? What does this feel like in my body? And allowing the space to just let it come. I think I used to be very proud of the fact that I was very like stoic. It was like, things don't faze me and I'm fine. And learning like to engage my body, engaging with somatics, is I've cried so much more in like the last 2 years than I think the rest of my life combined, because I just allow it to come without judging. So a lot of times, I wrote a post about this on Instagram. It's one of my favorite posts I think I've ever written. I was in my first trimester and I got really emotional at something. My husband was like, "Oh, it's those hormones." And I was like, like, is it just the hormones or is this real? Like, that feels so gaslighty. And I know he didn't mean it to be that way, but I was like, babe, this is real sadness. This is not just hormones just throwing out emotion. Like, this is my sadness. And maybe because I'm hormonal, I'm less able to keep it under control, but it's still there. And so validating ourselves too, that I'm a good person and I'm feeling this. This does not make me a bad mom. This does not make me, like, frustration's a big one. Are there days where it's like, I don't want to be doing this today. Like, I just don't want to mom today. It's too hard. I don't want to do it. And sitting with that for a minute and just saying, I am feeling very overwhelmed. Where am I feeling it in my body? And for me, there's a lot of like, I can feel chaos in my chest. Like, it feels like there's a storm inside my chest. And just finding the language to say, okay, where is it in my body? Can I sit with it? Can I acknowledge it? And then move through it. And there's a lot of release that happens when we learn to say, okay, I can move through. And this is very powerful for birth, because we always talk about transition like everybody has this huge emotional barrier they come up against. But in my last birth, after working with somatics, I didn't hit a barrier because I just was riding whatever came. There was no dam to be unblocked. And I think transition for a lot of women is they hit this wall where they don't know how to deal with that emotion, and the emotion has to come out and it's big. And a lot of times it can be doubt in themselves or fear of the future, inability to be with the unknown. The sensations become overwhelming, and then we hit this big well. And as we know, a lot of transition does not last. It's a short thing. And that's how all emotions are. They well up, they need to be acknowledged, and then they go back down. But if you shove them down, there is no resolution. So I always say emotions, like in somatics, is very similar to contractions. We learn to ride them. We learn to say, okay, here it comes, and I'm not going to resist. I'm not going to say, oh, no, 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 no. Because I know as a doula, anytime you see a woman who starts doing this, that we are not coping. We're trying to run. We're in our flight response. Anger's like, I want to be done. I want this over. Why did I do this? Or like the classic getting mad at your partner. You're like, you did this to me. Like, that's your fight response coming up. And just realizing like, my nervous system's feeling triggered right now. And in birth, that can be very comforting to say, okay, this is normal. This is human. Humans get this way when they're feeling very big emotions, and this will end. And so practicing that during pregnancy in like smaller forms can help it be smoother during birth, to be able to say, okay, I can greet this with curiosity. I can surrender to the bigness and accept I am feeling this right now. This is hard. And then wait for the resolution that I can trust will come.
I heard a quote recently that was saying, it's in the allow, not the how. And I feel like that's exactly what we're talking about with surrendering and with letting these big emotions move through us and not allowing them to be a barrier.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I love this. So I wrote a poem. I talk about it on my podcast. I have a podcast called Birth Mystics. And I wrote this poem in my second pregnancy, and I really love it. And it's, though the waves crash around me, tumultuous and fierce, I have nothing to fear. For I am not a ship navigating the storm. I am Poseidon, and the ocean is me. And I think there's some of that fear feels like this attack. And that's where our nervous system gets riled up, because we feel like something is attacking us. And a lot of our fears, whether it be a C-section or non-consent from our doctors or anything that during pregnancy you feel like, I'm really afraid of that, I don't want that to happen, we often see it as kind of this outside thing that's kind of like could possibly attack us. But starting to recognize, whether it be the intensity of labor or our fears, that when we engage with them, like it's part of us. This fear is like a warning signal. It's communication from our subconscious saying there's something here we need to have a plan or an idea or a better understanding of so that it doesn't feel dangerous anymore. So we know, okay, if that were to happen, here's what I would do. Or here's the chances of that happening, so I have an appropriate amount of worry about it. Because sometimes we worry about something super something that's not very likely to happen, but we worry about it as if it was likely to happen. So a lot of times just engaging, once again, that curiosity of high fear or high intensity, what is the message? What is the learning that you hold for me that I can take and either search for more understanding or understand myself better through? So
being able to walk through those fears during pregnancy and even create a plan. What would I do in this situation? So let's say your water breaks before your contractions start. What is my plan? What is my next step? Or, just like taking any scenario from your birth plan and actually walking to the edge of that fear, beyond that fear, is going to allow your body to be able to release and to kind of walk down a path that you have mentally walked before.
Yes. And also, how am I going to resource myself? Like, what resources am I going to draw on if this thing I really don't want to happens, so that I can feel supported, seen, held, loved, even if I'm doing this thing that I really don't want to have to do? What resources do I have, and how can I engage with them, right? Is also, because planning, a lot of it's like, planning is very cerebral. And it is important that we have that understanding to like soothe our logic mind, but that sometimes isn't enough to sink down. But if we know, okay, even if I end up in my worst case, my partner knows what to say and what to do, and we know how to connect with each other so that I will feel like we're together. I know who I can reach out to who's knowledgeable. I know ways I can soothe myself. So resourcing can just be, I know that I love this music. I can ask to have this music on during my C-section because that's really helpful for me. Like for me, the ocean waves is like, that was on through my entire last labor. It was just the sound of the ocean. And so I know that that's for me a cue, to cue safety, to cue calmness. And so understanding your own personal resources and seeing how they could support you in those fears if they were to be actualized.
For the birth of my third son, I chose to have a home birth. And the amount of people that would ask me, well, what if you have to transfer to the hospital? And as I started processing that myself, I thought we all utilize the resources that we need at the time we need them. Some of us choose to experience our labor and our delivery and our postpartum care at a hospital. And as I was thinking about it, there was no sense of failure to transfer to the hospital. I said, my plan is to labor at home, to push my baby out at home, and to stay at home. But if at any time I need the resources that a hospital can provide, I'll transfer there, and I'll utilize those resources and the medical staff and their training to benefit me and my baby. And so there was no sense of urgency or fear or trepidation. If this event happens, like this is where we'll go. And it gave me a huge sense of relief and peace. And a lot of other individuals who are looking outside, all that they see is the fact that you'll be a few minutes away from assistance if you have a medical emergency. But in my mind, I wanted to create an environment that was quiet and solitude and without the distractions, without that element of time. What if I show up to the hospital and I'm only 2 centimeters dilated? What if I feel like I have to push and then we don't make it to the hospital? I wanted to be in my own home where I could allow my body to birth on whatever timeline it chose. And that birth to me was an incredible evidence of allowing our bodies to perform in the way that they want to and the timeline that they have, instead of trying to be on a different timeline and not to inconvenience a provider. It was really magical.
Oh, I love that for you. That's beautiful. I think that that's really healthy to say, I see the hospital as a resource. And a lot of people who do home births really don't want that. When I was planning my first out of hospital birth, so I have 4 kids, the first 2 I told you about. My third was a birth center, my fourth was at home. And I think for getting really curious about what are my holdups? One of mine was, I'm a doula, I should not have things happen. Like, things should go smoothly because I know so much, right? And like, that was some sort of insurance that things would go well. But I had to learn, like, no, I need to trust my body. And if my body needs help, I need to be okay with that. I shouldn't be judging my body if I end up needing assistance. Like, if I actually truly trust my body, like we talk about a lot in the natural and home birth community, like a lot of people choose home birth because they want to let their body do what it needs to do. But does that trust end if your body needs medical support? Do you know, like, for some women, I feel like that is a holdup where it's like, if I transfer, I failed, or my body's failed, or why couldn't my body just do it the way it's supposed to? But if you need help, then your body needs help, and that's what it needs. And taking kind of that judgment out of it, right? And I think that's really what it comes down to. I love the births where women can really be in their bodies, and you can see a difference, like when they're trying to think through what they're doing, like, oh, was this position a good upright position from this class I took? Or when they're asking their bodies, what do you need? When they're actually in their bodies and get in the most, I love when women get in just these interesting positions or make whatever noise they feel like their body needs in order to cope, because that's an embodied birth, is saying, okay, I've learned all this, I've gathered all these resources, and now I'm hands off. And now I'm going to follow whatever comes and however I feel and whatever feels good, without feeling like I need to people please those around me. That's a huge thing at the hospital, is that they've got this kind of idea of this is how one should act. And you don't want to be a difficult patient. But at home, there's a lot more space just to be whatever you need to be and to act however you need to act to get your baby out, right? So I think that's really beautiful.
I've had 3 cesarean sections, planning to have a 4th baby. I don't know how that birth is going to go. You know, most of the time we can plan, but we don't know how it will go. And already I feel so empowered by this podcast and just making the best birth for you and what that looks like. With my other 3 births, I didn't really have a lot of birth knowledge. I kind of just went along with trusting the professionals, and this is what they said to do, and so I did it. And just giving myself grace for what I knew at the time and moving on towards that moving forward, and not judging myself for what I knew at the time.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. It's like, how can I hold that compassion in my heart that I did the best I could with the knowledge I had at the time, and use it to move forward and maybe make decisions. I want to show up in the world differently now, without judging the way I used to. So I think sometimes we are changing, we feel like regret or judgment towards the things we're changing away from. But I love that it's like, I did the best I could. I had 3 C-sections, I have 3 babies. And what are some ways, whether it's a C-section or any other choice I decide to make, that feels right? Like, that sounds so simple, but what feels right for me? And if the C-section feels right, what are some things and resources I can use to help myself feel more connected? Like, there's like gentle cesareans and family-centered cesareans now that are becoming more and more used, where you can have like the music on. You ask the staff to keep their voice low, skin to skin as soon as possible. They have like clear drapes. And all of these are beautiful resources and options to help us to not feel like it's so black and white. Like, either I have a connected birth or I have a C-section. And C-section is full disconnection, out of control, medical. Like, a lot of times I'll have doula clients who end up with a C-section are kind of like, well, I don't know if I need you anymore. And I'm like, you do. Trust me. Like, I can still help so much to help this feel like a positive, connected experience, even though it's not the route that you're originally planning to take. So I think that's beautiful that you're kind of thinking about, how can I really be in my authenticity and be in what feels good, and not feel like you're moving into the birth community now with this podcast and different things, to not feel like, oh, I have to do it a different way because I have more knowledge, but to let that bring you full circle. Because that's the pendulum sometimes. The pendulum swings from full medical to, I don't trust anything medical, full natural. And we have to find that middle ground of, I trust my body and I know that medical births are necessary and it can be helpful and right for people to have medical births.
So Katie, because you support women in their births, What are some of the things that you have seen in labor that can really give that power to a family?
I think just one of the big things is just saying things in a way that is not leading. Like just my language being language of what's right for you. Here's some ideas. Are you feeling good? Check-ins. Are you feeling good about what's happening right now? Do you need more space as you're making this decision? Because a lot of times, especially in hospital births, but I hear this at home as well, people feel like their provider's making a suggestion, but because of their own people-pleasing tendencies, it doesn't feel like a suggestion. It feels like what they should be doing. Because, oh, it's my medical professional, they know better than me, so I'll just do that. But really giving people that space to say, there are other options. Is that what feels right? Do you need a minute to check in with yourself and sit with it if this is the way forward for you? And then also just holding that space for them to say no and being that kind of buffer where it's like, okay, do you want some time to decide? Should we have the staff, the midwife, leave the room while you guys have a discussion? And then when we come back, you can let us know what feels right. And then reminding you, okay, if you want to say no, you can say no. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say yes. Whatever feels right for you, but making sure they have someone who's like really just, I think that's the power of a doula in a lot of ways, is that it's just this safe space. And that's where some doulas, I think, struggle a little bit, not to bring their bias into the space. But that's where I feel like my entire doula journey, I've gone my path, right? And I finally landed at a place where I'm like, you are the only one who knows what a positive birth means. And you are the only one who knows what is happening in your body. Nobody else, not me, not the provider, nobody. And so you're the one who, like, you need to express that. You need to be able to say, this is what I'm feeling is right, or this is what sounds good, or I'm really feeling like I need some more time, or hey, I'm feeling like something's going on. Will you please listen to me and pay attention? And a lot of times women get really caught up in that people pleasing. And so one of my big passions is just to get really good prenatally and say, hey, let's talk about your people pleasing patterns. Like, what do they look like? How are they possibly going to show up during this birth? And how do you want to show up? How do you want to show up during this birth? And what does a positive birth mean for you? And that's what I'm going to support, is those things.
I love that. What are some of the ways we can get familiar with the ways that we cope or the ways that we do people please?
I love to ask this when you're with your partner. And I'll just talk about, okay, think about or journal about, or if you have a doula, you can have a conversation. What in life, normal life, when you're feeling stressed, what does that look like? Like, what things stress you out and how do you react to that stress? And a lot of times clients will be like, I don't know, and ask their partner. And it's like, hey, let's have a conversation. Like, for me, a lot of times my first is I'll get annoyed a lot easier. Like, my senses get very sensitive. So like I'll get overwhelmed through like sound is a big one for me. Like my baby crying or loud noises will just all of a sudden be too much. And then touch. If people touch me, like, and my kids have stuff in my face, I'll get snappy. And then my second phase, I call it phase 2. Phase 2 is shutdown. When I'm like, okay, nobody cares, whatever. I'm just going to like, I don't care. I'm strong. I don't care. I'm going to shut it down. Doesn't matter anymore. And if I get to phase 3, which used to happen not very often, is crying. But I'll just get to the point where I'm just like, I'm just so overwhelmed. This is too much for me. I've shifted this a lot. Because I became so aware, and it was like, is that how I want to show up in the world? Is those 3 phases? And I've gotten a lot better at being like, hi, self, I'm overwhelmed now. And instead of getting snappy because I feel like no one's meeting my needs, I'm going to ask for help, or I'm going to resource myself. I'm going to get resources so I do not move into other phases. And helping clients see, okay, what is the beginning for you? Do you withdraw? Are you going to be weepy? Are you going to be angry? Or what's the, like, if you're just annoyed or stressed, that immediate reaction. And if that shows up in labor, then I can say, hey, I see that you're stressed. Or your partner can say, hey, babe, it feels like you're stressed. What do you need? How can we help you? Do you want to try this? Do you want to try something new? Do you want some water? Are you hungry? You know what I mean? Just how can we shift this moment? And then asking what helps most in those situations. And for me, it's that directness. Someone looks at me and says, Katie, I see that something's off. Do you want to talk about it? And I can be like, yes, I am so annoyed because this and this and that and that. And then I can talk it out, and then I move through it because somebody cares. And a lot of times that's what we need, is we just need to know that somebody cares. But having those conversations with your partner or your birth team and being like, hey, this is how I see myself becoming agitated. Like, I could see myself becoming bothered if my partner's on his phone. That's what I hear a lot. Like, if my partner gets on their phone, I'm immediately going to be very easily annoyed because it feels like he doesn't care. And then just let the partner know, hey, then you need to be, if you're on the phone updating, like, let's talk about the things that are okay on the phone. Like, are you okay with him updating people? And if not, then, like, why don't you ask him to just not be on the phone in advance? Like, hey, babe, birth's a big deal, and I really would love for you to be present with me. And one of the things that hurts me is when you have your phone out. Do you think it'd be okay if you just put your phone away for the entire birth? I just not have it. You know what I mean? Like, realizing what bothers me, and can I have a conversation in advance that will keep it from happening?
With birth, are there ways we can prepare beforehand as we head into birth and thinking about our mental state?
Oh, yes. And I think the big thing is, like, a lot of people take a birth class, and there's lots of tools and resources and options you can use to help yourself to relax through birth. Like, I could go off for a very long time on all the possibilities that exist, but learning the ones that really work for you. Like, I had one client, I'll never forget this. She was taking a hypnobirthing class, and she was like, I'm listening to all the tracks every day because that's what they told me to do. I was like, cool, which one do you like best? She's like, oh, I love the colors. There's a colors one, Colors of Peace.
The rainbow relaxation.
Yes, the rainbow relaxation. I love that one. And I was like, great. Are there some that you don't love as much? She's like, ugh, I hate the affirmations. They annoy me so bad. I was like, why are you listening to them? She was like, well, they said to listen to all of them every day. Like, that'll help you. And I was like, doesn't sound like it's helping you. So sometimes there's that level of, like, I don't need to do all the things. I need to find the things that are helpful for me that really feel impactful. I always say, we're busy people. It's a busy world. Let's find the most impactful things with the least amount of effort that feel good. Because if you have natural motivation to do something, it's easy. There's ease. But if you're trying to force yourself to prepare in ways that don't even feel that good, it's not great. And that's a way you can learn to honor yourself and your body and what works for you. Is simply to say, okay, I'm looking up a couple different guided meditations, for example. Those can be very helpful to help you turn off, like, the thought stream and sink into more of your body or your subconscious. And just saying, okay, which ones work best for me? And I'm going to single in on some of those things. Are there stretches that make my body feel really good and I feel very, like, in tune with my body while I stretch? Like, some people love to do yoga, and that's a wonderful way to prepare body and mind. One of the simplest ones is the breath. Like, there's a whole bunch of exercises that come around just our breath, because our breath is the bridge. It's the constant companion between us and our bodies. Like, we can always tune into our breath. It's always there. It'll be there in the OR. It'll be there in a natural birth. It'll be there in transition. It'll be there postpartum. And it's free, it's easy. And it's a way that we can really help ourselves relax, is learning to tune into and slow down just our breath. Just that can be powerful for a lot of people. So finding the things that feel good.
And I think it's important to note too that there is such a thing as too much research. Once we feel like we have our answer, the more we research, maybe we would get more fear, or we would get too overwhelmed or distracted or unsure. So once you're sure, go with that and move on.
Yes, I always say, like, there's a lot of people do a lot of top-down preparation, which means they prepare cerebrally and expect it to affect their body and their birth. And then we do not have enough in most classes and anything of bottoms-up preparation, which is ways that we prepare our bodies that can help our minds feel at ease and affect our body from, like, the body-based perspective. And those things can just be eating a little better, moving our bodies, being in our sensations and things like that. But I agree, some people over-research to the point that they feel like, because you don't birth in your research brain. That part of your brain is supposed to turn off when you're in labor. You're not supposed to be in your facts brain. You're supposed to be in your, like, your animalistic brain, your body, like your sensual brain, and in those, your emotional brain. All those are supposed to be on during labor. So some people gather lots of facts and expect that to be the thing that carries them through. But often that's the thing that gets turned off. And you're not supposed to access it. And if you do, you have to come out of the place you're supposed to be during labor to access all the information and then find your way back in, which can be jarring. So I agree. You can definitely over-research.
In the book Resilient by Rick Hansen, he says, allowing yourself to be vulnerable during birth doesn't mean you're weak. It means you are strong enough to accept help, listen to your body, and trust the process.
I love that.
Katie, you have been a wealth of knowledge, just this deep well of beautiful water that has poured over us and given our hearts and minds hope for birth. Do you have any favorite resources that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
There's a book called Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine. If you especially are a woman who's birthing with a history of trauma, a history of loss, and honestly, basically all of us have some level of developmental trauma and things we've lived in our culture that are very heavy for us and difficult to overcome. So trauma can be a trigger word where people are like, I've never been raped, so I'm not traumatized, or I've never had assault. But trauma is just we all have some trauma we need to move through. So, but especially those who've had a larger event that they know is very heavy for them. I love that book. It's a very accessible way to understand trauma and the body and understand the ways we can support our bodies in moving through trauma. I really love that book. That's one of my favorites.
Thank you. Our Mom Squad Secret of the Week is by Helen. She says, proper nutrition and movement, especially after a cesarean section, is vital to full and healthy recovery. Have a small snack with plant or animal protein every 2 hours to maintain a steady metabolism. So that's great. Just in talking about movement and the body and preparing from the down up, that's a great way, is nutrition.
For sure.
Well, Katie, is there anything else that you'd like to share on how we can prepare our hearts and minds for pregnancy and birth?
It's that mixture. I like to say that I love to live in that space that's between self-reclamation and self-compassion. Like, can I reclaim my voice? Can I reclaim my autonomy? Can I reclaim that, but not have these huge expectations of myself that I'm setting myself up to fail by thinking that if I do these things, then everything will go perfect? Like, can I have that self-compassion in my other hand where I can say, it's okay that this is moving slow. It's okay that I'm making a choice that others might not think is ideal because it feels right. And if you can live in that place together and especially move those two energies towards your body, because there is a lot to be reclaimed as women in our society with our bodies. Like even just loving our bodies when they're not the ideal body is a huge topic, right? And that comes into birth with us. But if we can take those two topics and think, I can hold both of those in my hands and grow. For me, that's the key to growth, is can I reclaim what there is to reclaim and love and have compassion for myself through it all. So thank you guys for letting me come on. It's been really great. I'm always so excited to share about these things. I'm grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode. We hope you've been elevated and inspired by this week's expert.
Subscribe today so you never miss an episode. And please share our podcast or post on your social media so that other moms and dads-to-be can also have the best birth.
Please note that the information provided is based on the expert's insights and personal experience. It is not intended as medical guidance. Please seek the advice of your medical provider as it applies to your specific condition.